What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another NFL countdown, and in this top 10, I'm going to be counting down the top 10 NFL quarterback supporting casts in the NFL. So what's a supporting cast in my opinion? A supporting cast is everything that surrounds the quarterback, be that coaching, defense, the offensive players surrounding the quarterback, offensive line play, running game. All of that is taken to account in this top 10. Let me know your top 10 in the comment section below. Let's kick off my top 10 with a new entry on the list, and that would be the Chicago Bears. If we're talking about one of the worst quarterback supporting casts last season, you're probably discussing Chicago in that conversation. But in 2018, that is completely flipped on its head for Chicago. The wide receiver position was totally upgraded. They added Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel. They drafted Anthony Miller. They get Kevin White back. So you have 4 new receivers that you didn't have last year. They also added Trey Burton at tight end through free agency. Their offensive line, I would say, is a top half offensive line. It's not great, but it's not bad. Then you look at the running back situation. They already had a great running game, even with John Fox as their head coach. They had Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen, a great combination with 2 totally different type of running backs. You add on to the fact their new head coach, Matt Nagy, is one of the better offensive coaches in football. So that definitely helps if you're a quarterback going onto this team. And the defensive side of the football was a top 10 unit last year. The Chicago Bears are a new entry onto one of the teams that have the 10 best supporting casts in the NFL. At number 9, I have the New England Patriots. Now, when we're talking about supporting casts, sometimes Tom Brady gets a little bit too much credit, and sometimes Tom Brady doesn't get enough credit. And I feel like the Patriots, yes, they are a very talented team, but without Tom Brady, they would not be the championship caliber team that they are. I would say that the defensive side of the football is going to be better for the Patriots. I don't think it could be much worse. Of course, the pass rush should be better. The linebacking position is getting an upgrade with Dante Hightower, the leader of the defense, coming back. They also signed Adrian Claiborne, traded for Danny Shelton on the defensive line. They have Derek Rivers coming back, so that's definitely going to help that defense out. I do think that the supporting cast in terms of receivers has taken a significant hit with the losses of Brandon Cooks and Danny Amendola, 2 of the better receivers for the Patriots last season. Cooks going over 1,000 yards, and we know what Danny Amendola did for the Patriots in the playoffs. The Patriots still do have Julian Edelman and Chris Hogan, 2 guys that Tom Brady knows has a good chemistry with those 2 guys. At tight end, of course, they have Rob Gronkowski being one of the reasons they're on this list because he's one of the top 5 weapons in football. Their offensive line, yes, they did lose Nate Solder, but I believe it could be even stronger in 2018, getting back Marcus Cannon from injury and also trading for Trent Brown, who is one of the better pass blocking tackles in the NFL. Plus, they drafted Isaiah Wynn in the first round. The running backs, they did draft Sony Michel, so that should help the running game, right? Well, they did lose Dion Lewis, so I'd say that's an even loss, but Michel at this point is injured. But you look at Rex Burkhead, James White, Jeremy Hill, all of these 3 guys and what they can do in the passing game and the running game, and they're a good complement of weapons for Tom Brady. Of course, you add in the fact they have the greatest head coach of all time. I'd love to be a quarterback for him. And then the offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, has been probably a top 3 offensive mind of the past 20 years. That allows them to be a top 10 team at number 9. At number 8, I have the Patriots' so-called rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the reason why they're on this list, let's just get it out there, they have a ton of high-caliber weapons. Antonio Brown is considered the best receiver in the game. Juju Smith-Schuster is probably going to break out this year and be a top 15, 20 receiver in the game. Le'Veon Bell, when he's on the football field and he's willing to participate, he's probably the best running back in the NFL. Then you add on the fact they drafted James Washington at wide receiver, guys like Eli Rogers, Vance McDonald, Jesse James are not bad complementary pieces. The offensive line, you would have to say, is a top 5 unit, whether that's run or pass blocking. And then the defense, I mean, it's not stellar, but it hasn't been bad statistically. The linebacker position without Ryan Shazier sure is a little bit weak, but they do have a decent defensive line that can get some pressure and cause some turnovers. So Big Ben has a lot of help on this Steelers team, including a head coach, Mike Tomlin, who keeps the pieces together and keeps the whole Steelers franchise afloat. Pittsburgh Steelers are here at number 8. At number 7, the LA Chargers. A lot of people have been talking about the LA Chargers, including the Bottom Line View's very own Dilly Vanilli this offseason, but the LA Chargers, the hype is real. They have a ton of talent. Really the first time in a long time supporting Phillip Rivers. Of course, they had a lot of this talent last season, but as a football team, they just weren't able to stay off the IR and weren't able to put it all together. It's a great supporting cast. He has Melvin Gordon at running back, who I would say is a top 10 running back. Behind Melvin Gordon is Austin Eckler, kind of a sneaky pass-catching running back. Their offensive line is upgraded with Mike Pouncey. Wide receiver, I think, is probably the most underrated unit in the NFL at wide receiver. Keenan Allen is a fantastic route runner and a top 6 to 7 receiver in the game. You have Tyrell Williams, Mike Williams, and who knows what he could be in this offense. Travis Benjamin. Offensively, Chargers are set, and that's not even including Ken Wisenhunt, who's been a solid OC everywhere he's gone in his NFL career. Defensively, they have one of the best defenses in the NFL with one of the best pass rushes, Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram. The Chargers not only have a great supporting cast for Rivers on offense, but also one of the top defenses in the NFL, making it worthy of the top 10 selection. At number 7, the Atlanta Falcons. Like the Chargers, very similarly, a lot of talent on both sides of the football. Matt Ryan doesn't have quite the offensive mind that he used to, and Kyle Shanahan, of course, last season didn't have the numbers that he did in 2016 with Steve Sarkisian at the helm, which I think actually holds them back from being higher on this list. 2 years ago, Atlanta was arguably the best situation for a quarterback in the NFL. But right now, I mean, Matt Ryan does have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Arguably the best supporting cast of weapons in the NFL, whether that's Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, and Tevin Coleman at running back, the rookie Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu. And they can run the ball, they can pass the ball, they have great balance, and a lot of that is also due to their underrated offensive line, which is pretty solid. I would call it a top 10 offensive line. It's not elite by any means, but it gets the job done. Defensively, this defense was even better than the offense last year, which makes it an awesome place for a quarterback because you know your defense can stand up and win you games. I do think that they did lose some players on the defensive line, which I do think will hurt, but they still have solid pieces there, whether it's Grady Jarrett or Terrell McClain or Tack McKinley. The linebacker position is pretty good, especially the top 2 with Devondre Campbell and also Deion Jones. The safety and corner position, the secondary as a whole, is elite. Robert Alford, Desmond Trufant, Brian Poole, Isaiah Oliver, Keanu Neal, Ricardo Allen, Ron Parker as well added to the mix. So this is a defense with a lot of talent, specifically in the secondary. They're a very fast defense that has the capability of shutting down opponents, which also helps the quarterback out. Yes, the offensive coordinator situation isn't the greatest, but with the weapons that the Falcons have, with the defense they have, and also the head coach in Dan Quinn, this is a great situation for any quarterback. At number 5, the rival of the Falcons, the New Orleans Saints. Now, the Saints are slightly higher because of the offensive coordinator situation. Now, Sean Payton, I would call arguably the best offensive coach of the last 20 years. I know I put McDaniels in that conversation, and I'd put Sean Payton probably at the top of that list. Not only does Drew Brees have a great play caller and offensive mind, but he has the talent on offense, the offensive line, the run game, but also a sneaky good defense. They have at wide receiver an upgraded position from last season with Michael Thomas, Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith, who they drafted, and they also brought in Cameron Meredith. Then on the offensive line, I thought this was arguably the best unit last year for a majority of the regular season. They weren't able to quite maintain it throughout the playoffs, but they still are a top 5 unit in my opinion. The running game is great with Ingram and Kamara. Then you have the defense, which has some studs with Cameron Jordan and Marshawn Lattimore on the pass rush and in the secondary, which really allow this defense to mix and match a lot. Looking at this team, the Saints may not strike you as the greatest place for a quarterback, but when you consider the offensive coordinator, when you consider the improvement on defense, and also the weapons that Drew Brees has to offer, Drew Brees is in just about the best situation he could be in at this point in his career to win another Super Bowl. At number 4, the LA Rams. The Rams are a team that are loaded outside of their quarterback. Of course, Jared Goff is not a bad quarterback. I would still not call him a great quarterback, but he certainly has a great supporting cast, and in my opinion, it's a top 4 unit. Brandon Cooks was brought in from New England to stretch the field as a deep threat. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods work it underneath at wide receiver. You also have depth at the position with young players like Pharaoh Cooper and Josh Reynolds. The offensive line is relatively solid. Andrew Whitworth really held it down last year at left tackle. And really, Todd Gurley is the centerpiece of this offense, so it keeps a lot of pressure off Jared Goff. Not to mention, Sean McVay is a top 3 offensive coach in football right now. And that's not even to mention they have Wade Phillips, who's the defensive coordinator, who's arguably the best defensive coach in football. But then not only do they have the defensive mind, but they have the defensive players. Aaron Donald's the best defensive player in the league. They have Ndamukong Suh now. Michael Brockers is there on the defensive line. A little bit weak at linebacker, but the secondary makes up for it with Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib, LaMarcus Joyner, John Johnson, Roby Coleman. All these players just add to the mix for the Rams. A lot of talent, defensive line, secondary, wide receivers, running back, offensive line. Jared Goff has everything at his disposal to get it done and to win a Super Bowl for the Rams. Now, can he do it is the question, but he certainly has a supporting cast to do so. At number 3 is the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Vikings, you could argue, is number 1. And if you put the Vikings at number 1, I would not argue with you. The biggest reason I have the Vikings at number 3 and not a little bit higher is just because I think the Vikings offensive line is probably the worst of any team on this list. It's not a great unit. I wouldn't even call it good. It's probably below average. It's decent run blocking wise, but pass blocking wise, it can definitely get exposed. They do have great receivers in a good combination in Thielen and Diggs, but the depth isn't the greatest. Running back situation is pretty great with Dalvin Cook and Latavius Murray. Also, Kyle Rudolph in the red zone is a great option. But defensively, though, the Vikings make up for that depth with a great defense. They were number 1 last year, and I think they'll be a top 5 defense once again this year. They have a very good defensive line that can get after the quarterback with Everson Griffin and Daniel Hunter. They can stop the run very well. Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr are both very good backers. The secondary is super underrated. Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes. They added in the draft Mike Hughes, Mackenzie Alexander. They have Terrence Newman. They have Harrison Smith, one of the best, if not the best safety in the league. Andrew Sendejo as well. So this defense is loaded. This team is loaded on both sides of the ball. They have weapons. They have defense. They have a pretty solid head coach in Mike Zimmer. The offensive coordinator situation, we have to see how John DeFilippo works out coming from Philadelphia, losing Pat Shurmur. But I think that the Vikings overall have one of the top 3 supporting casts for a quarterback in the NFL. And then at number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are the Super Bowl champions for a reason. Not only because they have a great quarterback, but because they have a great team. Carson Wentz is the quarterback going forward for the Eagles, but he has plenty of talent surrounding him as well as great coaching. It starts there with Doug Peterson, who's a great offensive coach and a very, very good play caller. Jim Schwartz is also one of the better defensive coordinators in the game, so that helps the defense, which is where I'm going to start. The defense was really the star of this team last year, with the defensive line taking over with Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Derek Barnett. They added Michael Bennett, and Haloti Ngata. They still have Chris Long, very deep unit, and they're able to stop the run and get after the quarterback. But Carson Wentz, he has on offense a lot of under-the-radar sort of players. I mean, this offensive line, in my opinion, is the best in the NFL, and that's even outdoing the Cowboys, with Jason Peters coming back at tackle, Lane Johnson at right tackle, Brandon Brooks and Wisniewski at guard, and Jason Kelce was the best center in the game last year. So you have a great offensive line who open up holes for the running game with Jay Ajayi, Darren Sproles, Corey Clement. You have receivers, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, and then you throw in a great tight end with Zach Ertz, a rookie who looks really promising in Dallas Goedert. So you have a lot of players, a lot of talent on this Eagles team. No wonder they won the Super Bowl. But my number one supporting cast is, of course, in my opinion, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, why the Jaguars as opposed to a team like the Eagles or the Vikings or even the Rams, where they're a little bit more balanced than the Jaguars? The Jaguars are number one because, in my opinion, the Jaguars have a historically great defense. Now, the Vikings have a great defense. The Eagles have a great defense. Even the Rams, the Chargers have promising good defenses. But when you look at the Jaguars last season, they had a historically great defense. They caused a lot of turnovers. They scored touchdowns. They got sacks. They got strip fumbles. They won games by themselves. They didn't need a quarterback to play. Honestly, they could have ran Wildcat all game and probably won 5 games last year. So they have depth upon depth upon depth on this defense, loaded with talent, especially on the defensive line. Calais Campbell, Malik Jackson, Yannick Ngakoue, Marcel Darius, Dante Fowler, Taven Bryan, Dwayne Smoot. It just continues to go on. Telvin Smith, Miles Jack at linebacker. Jalen Ramsey's the best corner in the league. AJ Bouye is a top 3 corner in the league. You have Barry Church, Tashawn Gibson, Ronnie Harrison at safety. And everybody knows about the defense, right? So I just broke down why the difference between Jaguars, Vikings, Eagles. Jaguars have a historic defense. Vikings and Eagles have a great defense. Now you look at offense. I think this offensive supporting cast is supremely underrated because Blake Bortles is not a very good quarterback. And that's also to mention Nathaniel Hackett, who is a great offensive coordinator and did a superb job with this offense last year. Marquise Lee is pretty good. DJ Chark is a promising young rookie. D.D. Westbrook had his games last year. Keelan Cole can stretch the field. Dante Moncrief was a promising fantasy prospect on Indianapolis and now comes over to Jacksonville. That's 4 receivers deep, and I could probably even name more. The offensive line added Andrew Norwell, arguably the best guard in the NFL last year, and they were already very good, especially running the football, where Leonard Fournette is a beast. TJ Yeldon is a good backup, and Corey Grant can break plays anywhere on the field. And in my opinion, I've said it once, I'll say it again, if any of the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL played for the Jaguars, this team would be a great team and a Super Bowl champion. But because Blake Bortles is the quarterback, we just don't know if the Jaguars are going to be able to get it done. But at the end of the day, this is the best supporting cast, in my opinion, in the NFL and tops the league in 2018. I want to hear from you guys. Do you think the Jaguars are the best supporting cast, or do you see it differently? Do you think it's the Eagles or the Vikings or maybe a team I mentioned previously, or maybe a team not even on this list? Let me know in the comment section below. From Mitch of TheBottomLineView. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the subscribe button and like the video. Peace out.